Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game, so just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back.
All right, all you positive heads, welcome one and all. I am super excited that you've joined me on this magical today. Today, I thought I would share some session stories. In the last couple weeks, I have had two different clients come in as the apostles of Jesus, two different apostles of Jesus, and their stories were very similar. And I find it really interesting that this happened right at around the time of Easter, right around the time of year where we're telling the crucifixion story and the ascension story. And both of these sessions were very heavily centered upon the crucifixion, because both of these clients were still, to this day, carrying guilt and blame because of the crucifixion. They both carried the guilt and blame because they felt like there was something they could do about it. There was something that they could change to make it better so that that didn't happen. And the thing is, both clients' higher selves told them that no, there was absolutely nothing you could have done. This was the path. This was his path that he chose before he came in. And there was nothing either of you could have done to change that path. This is the way it was written. And Jesus knew it. He knew it going in, and he allowed it. In both sessions, they said he knew it and he allowed it because it was his path. And I found that very interesting. What I find extremely fascinating about doing these sessions is that the history that we know is not the history that people recollect when they go back into their own memories of being there at that time. The history that's written down in the books is completely different from the stories that I hear. And the things that I hear oftentimes are just not even included in the history books at all. They're completely things that I've never heard of before, things that we have not been taught, things that are not in our history books in the least bit. And I also find it interesting that we are now in this time where I'm sure you've already heard that Pluto is moving into Aquarius, and this planet moves very slowly, and it's been in Capricorn for a long time. And when I think about this transition, I think about Capricorn being an earth sign and Aquarius being an air sign, and Pluto being the planet of things that are hidden, of truths that are hidden, it's the planet of death and rebirth, the planet of transformation. And so these truths that have been hidden, buried deep in the earth underground for so long, are now coming out into the air to be spread, to be learned, into the air, mind. That is, the air is the symbol of mind. And so what we're seeing now in so many different ways is so many different truths coming to light. And so I find it interesting that through sessions, even more and more truth comes to light at specific times of the year, just to remind us, hey, here's the other story. Here's the potential real story. Because what's the real story? Because everyone has a story from their own perspective. Even in these two stories, there were two different perspectives. And it makes sense when you can have 10 different people in a room, you will have 10 different perspectives. Everyone has their own feelings, their own thoughts, the way they see things, their own distortions and vibrations from where they vibrate from, which creates their perspectives then. And so we all tell the story from a different angle. For example, the first story was the story of Judas. And Judas was very, very unhappy in his upbringing because he was involved in the Muslim priesthood and the temples there, and his father was a Pharisee. And he felt very separate from the whole thing. He didn't feel like he belonged, and he felt like he had to force himself to be a certain way in order that he could belong. And so he grew up listening to these priests and teachers who talked about nothing in his mind but power and manipulation. They weren't talking about open-heartedness and love and oneness. For him, it was all about power and rulership. And we fast forwarded then to when he became a disciple of Jesus. And he said that Jesus had called them from different areas. He wanted all different types of people to be his disciples. And so it's curious that the son of a Pharisee was one of his disciples. And, of course, looking back, if Jesus knew his plan, and when you think about Jesus, he was a very magical being. He was very connected. He listened very clearly. So, of course, if you could think, he most likely remembered his plan. And so he knew that it was in his benefit to have someone like Judas, because this person is going to help him fulfill his plan. And maybe he did this consciously or unconsciously, who knows? But this is why this specific group of men was put together. And Judas specifically became friends with Matthew because Matthew was a tax collector. And so because Matthew was a tax collector and Judas was the son of a Pharisee, the other disciples kind of looked at them as, we're not too sure about you guys. And so they stuck together. But Jesus wanted to have all these different backgrounds. And so that's what he did. And in the meantime, he's teaching acceptance and forgiveness. And so what a beautiful way to show people acceptance and forgiveness, but to bring a group together of all different backgrounds from all different places. Kind of sounds like the earth, right? All different backgrounds, all different cultures from many different places. The earth is like this hodgepodge of races, the way I see it, from all over the universe. And so Jesus was putting his own group together to create this environment to teach forgiveness and compassion. And so as time went on, Judas saw an opportunity to actually bridge the gap. Because his father being a Pharisee, he was able to talk to his father, and his father was listening to the message that Judas was teaching him. And he thought that they could tell the other Pharisees, hey, get this, understand this message, listen to this teaching. And what happened was the Pharisees, they used to trust Judas's father, but when they heard him understanding the message of Jesus, they no longer trusted him. And so what they did, they set him up. They told Judas that they wanted to talk to him, that they wanted to arrange a friendly meeting. And so that's what they did. They used Judas to set up this friendly meeting where Jesus showed up willingly, and that's where they grabbed him and took him. And the entire time, Jesus knew exactly what he was walking into. Judas, knowing this, felt a little betrayed by Jesus because he felt so upset by this. And Jesus knew about it the whole time. And he didn't like being the pawn from all sides. So he still carried that guilt of putting him in that situation, regardless of knowing that he knew and he allowed it. We then fast forwarded to the day of the crucifixion, where he was looking at Jesus carrying the cross, and he looked at him in agony, and he felt like it was all his fault. He just could not get away from that feeling like it's all his fault. And then he had to leave, because if he stayed there, then the soldiers would find him and kill him. And so it wasn't safe for any of the apostles there, and so he ran and hid. Eventually, hiding long enough, someone did find him. He was knocked to the ground and went to the spirit side. From there, when I talked to his higher self and asked what was going on here and why it was so necessary to show him this life, it was because he was still obviously carrying all of these emotions, and that forgiveness is the main lesson. Self-forgiveness. To forgive yourself because you could not have changed this. This was written. And isn't that interesting? Forgiveness. What was one of Jesus's main teachings? Forgiveness. He was teaching the apostles the same exact thing. So this client luckily was able to understand what was going on. He was able to get the message and was able to release all of this guilt and all of this blame and to forgive himself. Now, my next client was the disciple Thomas. And Thomas started off a little differently because he came right into the scene of the crucifixion where he was hiding and he was very scared. Obviously, when people come into a scene like this, they have no idea what is going on. All they're explaining to me is the hills and the buildings, they were white walls, and the sense and the feelings that they have. They were feeling so scared and they knew they were being chased, but they didn't understand why. So as the client continues to talk about what they're seeing, it all starts to become more and more clear. And she realized that she was an apostle. She looked down at herself and she saw herself in that traditional garb, wearing the sandals that you would typically think that they were wearing, the ones you see in all of the paintings, right? That's what she was wearing. And when I asked her why she was in this town or this place, she told me that they came to preach and that they would do that. They would go from town to town and they would spread the message. But at this town, they took him and they knew it. They all knew that it wouldn't be good. But the thing was with Thomas is that he felt that he should have gone with them, that he should have allowed himself to be taken along with Jesus. And he felt like a coward for not going. He felt that he didn't help him in his time of need. He felt that because Jesus was always caring for them, always helping them and protecting them, that he did not do the same for him when he needed him to do it for him the most. And so he carried so much guilt, as you could obviously imagine, right? Carrying so much guilt for that. So Thomas finds himself with Peter, and this is the one that he's hiding with. And Peter is telling him, Thomas, we have to hide, we have to run away, because we have to continue to spread this message. But Thomas is feeling so bad, like, no, we need to help him. Ultimately, of course, they continue to hide and run, and Thomas never forgave himself for it. Along the way, here came Judas. And when they saw Judas, they said, we don't like him. He's a traitor. He told on Jesus, and we don't like him at all. They yelled at him, and they told him how wrong he was and that he needed to go away. Judas said absolutely nothing to them. And when I asked, because I had already had this session with Judas, I said, well, do you get a sense of how he's feeling right now? And she said, yeah, he's really sad. Like he knows he did something wrong. And he also knows that we are all he has. And when he leaves, he just dropped everything. He had a sack of money and walked away. And that was one of the things that upset them, is because he had that sack of money, they thought he was paid for giving up Jesus in this way. Now, of course, that wasn't in my other session, so I don't know anything about that. I'm sure it's in another session story somewhere. But they didn't understand what Judas went through at all. They made an assumption. He didn't say a word, and they separated ways. When I asked her about why the soldiers were so concerned with Jesus' message, she said it's because the soldiers didn't approve, and they were supposed to love the gods that they were talking about. And Jesus didn't teach about all those gods. Jesus talked about oneness and love. And so the soldiers wanted to come and make sure that he didn't tell anybody, that he just stopped telling people that, because they couldn't control people in the way they wanted to if everyone understood oneness. And so when the soldiers came and got him, he said to Thomas that he had no choice, that it is written, it has been decided, and that he knew it would happen. So again, we're hearing the same story. It has been written, it has been decided. I'm willingly going. This is not your fault. Both of these clients carried the guilt and shame throughout all of their lifetimes since that lifetime, because this weighed so heavily on them. And as you can imagine, right, this is a very monumental figure in our history whose message changed the course of our history. And it's the message that has lived on. And this is what came through in this session. When I asked, what was the purpose of the crucifixion? Like, why did Jesus have to go this way? Why was that the plan? The purpose was to show love for others, that no matter what they did to him, that it didn't change his message, that they couldn't stop his teachings by killing him, and that the message would live on. And for my client, specifically for her, she had to learn, guess what? Forgiveness of self. I find it very interesting. Both apostles who came to see me were both learning forgiveness of self from the master himself. And so I think the takeaway for today is self-forgiveness. What kind of guilt or blame or shame are you carrying that you have zero control of, that you could not have changed because it was someone else's path, someone else's journey? It was not in your hands to change, but you're still carrying the guilt and the blame. So many of us are doing this. And so if this is something that you're feeling, forgive yourself. It is not for you. It is someone else's path, and it is not for us to change. It is not for us to control. We are just here to observe, to experience, to be. And when we can learn to forgive ourselves, game on. This is the way we can truly be at one with ourselves, with each other, and knowing that we are one with all. Of course, we can forgive ourselves knowing that we are part of this oneness, that there is not a single one of us who is more or less worthy than another. We can all forgive ourselves for the little mistakes that we've made, for the so-called mistakes that we've made. There are no mistakes. There are only experiences. Bring in a little self-forgiveness today. I love you all so much. I'm going to leave you with this song by Volo, Ascend. Until next time, I love you all.